I decided that, well, just to be fair, I also went to Google and signed up for its Actions Council. There's ways of doing this. One of the things they allow you to do, and maybe I'm not fully signed on, I'm not, so is enter a project. Didn't seem as clean and as easy to do as Alexa. But if I can do this with these smart assistants writing these skills, why can't I do it on the web? And let's do it in WordPress. So I came up with this project to create a way of having a post excerpt read when the user clicks a button or takes some other action. And to do this, we have to look at the Web Speech API, which covers voice recognition, natural language understanding and natural language processing, and speech synthesis or text-to-speech. Here is the specifications on GitHub for, let's go up to the top here. Okay, and it's pretty long. I went to the speech synthesis interface. You can see it's, well, it's readable and you can sort of figure what's going on, but like any hacker, I went right to the examples and started out with the simple one on the top here. And as you can see, this little piece, it will just speak hello world to the world, and just in that one liner. This is the second example is a little more robust in that it sets properties like the language, the rate of speaking, 120% of normal in this case, it's a floating point number, and it also sets a function to do something when the speaking ends. Interestingly, if you try this first function, it won't work. It's syntactically correct, but browsers today will not allow you to your website to speak to the user unless they take some action or something else to indicate they want to do it. So you need an initiation. Otherwise, this will throw an error into your JavaScript console. So let's break it down again into simple, much more into simple three-part steps. The first step is to create an utterance object by calling the new speech utterance method. You can set some properties, that's optional, specifically the text. The text could also go in the parentheses when you call the utterance. And then you just speak it. You call it the speak method. That's all there is to this. It's really easy. You can write an inline expression like this here, this H4 element, could be any element. I'm giving it a title. So we have a, there we go. As you can see, it has a title attribute to display and an on-click handler that calls the speak method on an utterance. And the utterance is whatever is in this element, this H4 element's content. In this case, it's going to be hello world. This is in WordPress, and this very line, without the color stuff to highlight it, is in here. Hello world. And it works. Hello world. Hello world. Okay. In fact, if you click it multiple times, hello world. It'll speak it multiple times. So I started writing, realizing that, oh, the problem with this I encountered is that the visual editors in WordPress don't like JavaScript in your post content. So if you want to put this, it'll work in any HTML program, but if you want to put it in WordPress, you have to be working in the text mode of your editor and make sure you save it in the text mode. Otherwise, the on-click handler will be stripped out. So how to get around this? Well, obviously, we would want to write a shortcode which will package it up and keep everything safe. So before I go there, I'm going to show you a bit of code. And this is my first test to see how we can do this. And I've got a little JavaScript function here called sayText, and you pass it what you want it to speak, and it creates an utterance and then speaks it. And here I'm setting a variable with a little bit of content. Okay, a simple paragraph with a span element that when you click it, we'll call it on the content. And the content is going to be this piece of the Gettysburg Address. Here it is on the web.
77 years ago, our forefathers brought forth upon this continent.
That's all I got edited in there. But if you notice, it doesn't care that I spelled the words 4 and 7 out, or even that I used fourth for the word F-O-R-T-H. It doesn't care, it's speech. So now I had to take a look at how do we modify this voice. This is a default voice, it's pretty boring. There are probably all these voices that are out there. And these are the attributes besides voice that you can assign to an utterance. You can give it a language, and language and voice work together with each other to determine what is going to be interpreted. You can set a volume, but I don't care about volume since the user has their own volume key. You can set a rate, the speed of the speaking, and that's going to be a floating point number between 0.1, which is very, very slow. Your browser will probably croak if you set that, and 10, which is so fast that it just is gone in a second. Pitch is the same way. You can speak very up high or you can speak very down low. Doesn't matter. You can set it a value and it'll adjust the voice to do that. And as I pointed out before, there's a text value that you can assign. And this indicated that it may be a limit. You cannot put an endless amount of text in there. You can't put War and Peace and have it read to you like an ebook. So this might be a problem. So we need to take a look at the methods we can use to control when your shortcode, your website is speaking. The speak method we've already seen, but here we have a cancel method. We can pause and resume, and then get voices is the important one in that it'll return an array of the voices that are available for you to characterize your spoken text. And get voices is a little tricky. We'll talk about that in a second. But back to our code. Here's my second try for just HTML. I wanted to do this in HTML safely before I moved it into my production WordPress workspace. So here's a function, the say text function that I'm writing. The first thing it does is cancel any speaking that's already in progress. If somebody clicks and says, I want to hear this, let's read it to them right away. And again, we check and see if we've got anything to say. And if we don't, we're just going to return. So we have these two parameters, what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. How is going to be an array of these properties. And right now I'm going to allow you to set the rate and the pitch, and then we'll speak it. So here I'm setting these variables. This is JavaScript for an array, an inline array. I've got some styles here to make it look a little nice. We don't have to look at that. And then down here, I have my controls. So taking a look on this on the web, we have this.
'Twas brillig, and the slathy toves did jar and gimble in the wave. All nimsy were the
And I can pause it and resume it.
borogoves, and the moan wraths outgrabe.
And
'Twas brillig, and the slathy toves did jar and
I can just silence it anytime I want to. So this is encouraging. And I thought, okay, let's work this up and into more HTML. And I came up with my voice synthesis playground. Here, what I'm doing is I have a form and I'm going to let the user specify the text and the voice attributes. And I have my controls over here on the right. Here's this. As you notice, though, there's no voices. Well, this is because for Chrome, or at least my version of Chrome, I'm still on OS Sierra because I have an old machine. Chrome has to get the voices through its own WebKit class of things. You can look at Safari, and Safari does provide you those voices. Okay. There's all these different voices from Alex to Zuzana. We could give it some try. I have some notes here to explain how to work this. Here, let's take a paragraph, paste it into my window. And
the voice synthesis engines will translate abbreviated units. For example, 5 kilometers will be spoken as 5 kilometers. Dates written numerically, like January 3rd, 2020, will be spoken out with month names and ordinals, but can refer to different dates, depending on the voice and language settings.
And I got some examples here. It'll also look and allow you to get non-Latin texts. If I set the voice, in this case, it's Majed, and the language is Arabic.
مرحبا بالعالم.
Or even Chinese. And this is Ting Ting. I happen to know that. Chinese.
你好，世界。
Both of these expressions translate to hello world. Okay. And I also found this browser compatibility chart, but I find that it's not really accurate because it says that Chrome can get voices as of version 33, but like I said, that's only with its proprietary. So that's that. We can put Safari away for now. This is at larryaronson.com/voice.html. Feel free to play it with as much and weird text as you want to. It's been pretty solid. Okay, where are we now? So let's look at some of the code behind this. And here is the whole voice code. I've got some areas collapsed because we don't have to look at it. Here's the styles that make all the forms and everything look pretty. Here's the main driver function here. Okay. We have some auxiliary functions to pick the values out of the drop menus anytime they change. And we have the main action here. We cancel what we had going, if anything. We disable the say it button. We create the utterance, assign the attributes, and we speak it. And that's simply it. Here is another attribute called onEnd, which takes the name of a function, or a function actually, not just the name of the function. And that will reset the say it button after the speaking is all finished. Now there's also the clear button, which resets the variables. And here's the hard part where we get the voices. We set up the select element and then call get voices. If we have something, we're going to search through them until we find the name that matches the one we've specified in the menu. And we have to get that number because that's what we're going to use to set the value of the option when it's chosen. And we get this, and I'm accumulating this in this loop to this variable. And then we're going to set the inner HTML or the content of the select element with all of these voices. So here's the HTML. We have an on-submit, which will return false because this form is going to run continuously. Here's my initial voice drop-down menu. Here's the language menu. And again, it has from A to Z to Zulu. And here's the table with the text area and the other options. The rate, so when the rate changes, we reset the variable with its current index and value. Here's the text area. It can be any size you want to. You can even, of course, the user can increase it and everything else. Here we place the JavaScript for the show and the hide notes toggle, just to remind you how that's working. That's just a little bit of this here. Okay, very easy expression. And well, that's it. That's all there is to this. It's just all HTML. It relies on no other files. You can copy this right off the web, doing a view source, make a file of it, and put it on your own machine. So now back to my read the excerpt, now that I had all the fun with this voice playground. And I came up with considerations. The controls have to be intuitive. And so that the user feels enabled when they're working with this and confident they know it's going to work the way they want to. We want to be able to customize the voice attributes. We don't want the user or the content developer or the blogger to be worried about, is this 1 to 10? Is this 0.0 or whatever? So we're going to give them some names that will, and assign values to those names. Again, we have to style it, how we want this to look, and we have to sanitize the text. That means getting rid of any of the HTML markup in the text, because an excerpt can have HTML. You have to get rid of the control characters and the entities. And then you have to document it, because I'm a firm believer that whenever you're going to write software, you write the user manual before you write the software and make it work that way. And then again, of course, how to package this. And the big question, of course, in consideration was what to call my plugin. But I proceeded with read the excerpt. So here is the PHP for this first version. And I've got areas collapsed here. There's 3 parts to it. There's a driver function, which is going to create the shortcode, which we then add to our instance of WordPress. And it's going to be called read excerpt. The second part is to get the style sheets into the header of the document, the WordPress header. And the last part is to enqueue the script, saytext.js, so that it's loaded in the footer. That's what this true here means. And when we do this, now let's take a look actually while we're here. Look at here is the JavaScript function sayText. It's a little bit more complicated than we saw in the last case. First of all, we have a new utterance. It's going to be, we're going to test to make sure that speech synthesis is actually working here. And if it does, we're going to then go through this, look to make sure that the array passed of attributes is indeed an array, and we can pick things out of that. And this is generalized to any value that's acceptable. And then we're going to look at the voice, and we're going to try to match the voice name with what we get from get voices. Down here at the bottom, we have speech synthesis speak, and an error and an alert if we failed at the very top to establish this. Here's what it's going to look like when we use it. This is a draft post I've been writing for a long time. And I just put the shortcode up here, as you can see. Let's see if I can make this bigger. Can you all see that okay? I guess so. So when we do a preview of this, now let me move my window over here. Oops, my chat window out of the way. Okay, if we do a preview, we get a link here, as we can see, right where I wanted it to be. And when we click it,
Voice is a catch-all term describing the rapidly growing ecosystem built around the use of spoken language as the user interface for querying, commanding, and conversing with digital devices and remote entities. Voice is a catch-all term describing the rapidly growing ecosystem built around the use of spoken language as the user interface for querying, commanding, and conversing with digital devices and remote entities.
Excuse me, I clicked it twice. So the next stage was, okay, where I'm going to, here's the help for it, by the way. I played around with the cancel button. You didn't see one there, and you didn't see any way for me to cancel it, because that got a little tricky going between the PHP to generate it and set and reset it and the JavaScript. But anyway, yeah, I had a reference to that in here. So basically, this is everything I've already said. So then I had some ideas. Why just the excerpt? Why shouldn't we be able to speak any content in the post, any section, whether it be an element or several paragraphs or anything at all? And while we're at it, why not be able to speak the value of a custom field? So we can put arbitrary pieces of text. They'll be hidden. They won't be seen by search engines unless you print them otherwhere. But you can then have any number of pieces of spoken text that can add to places in your post. You know, click to hear more, click to hear more. And then I thought, okay, one more place. We have the image description. Now, normally themes don't display the description of the image. It's there on the attachment page when you're editing an image, but it's available and it could add a lot of information, especially for visually handicapped people who may not see the image. You can put a long description there, up to 32K. And when people just click on the image, they'll find it. And then I just said, okay, I'm through with the cancel button. We'll just click on the element second time or the link, and that'll cancel the first. But again, I ran into a problem here. When you have overlapping standalone and container shortcodes, they can overlap. You read the excerpt at the beginning. If there's then a container following it, the read the excerpt will take everything following it to the end of the next shortcode with the same name. But there is a way to pass the name of the shortcode into the function that's driving it. So let's see where we are here. So I wrote ListenUp, and here is the first iteration. Here is where we're going now. This is close to its last release, even though I haven't touched it in a few months. So just briefly to go through it, we handle our attributes. When you have a driver function for a shortcode, you're passing its attributes. The content, if it's a container, will be passed for you. If you don't want a container, you set it to null and it'll override it. And this is how you get the name of the shortcode to use actually in the post. I'm not in the post, in the shortcode itself. So here I decided to provide a lot of attributes for this shortcode. You can give it the ID of a different post to read the excerpt. Okay, might be useful. You can give it a name for the custom field. You can give it a class for how to style the link or whatever text you click on. You can give it a class, additional text to prefix whatever is going to be said. So you have an introduction to it, your voice, pitch, speed, language, the link that's going to be applied if it's the excerpt, and the title. And of course, you make the post available to your function. We look and reset the ID if one's provided. And then we go and look at the different ways this shortcode can be called. And if I go to the bottom here, you'll see I'm adding 4 shortcodes with 4 different names. Okay, but each one of them is calling this one same driver function. And this is how I tell which one it is and which mode I'm in when I start processing things. Okay, so that's this section in here. Here's where we get the context, the content of what we're going to say, either from the excerpt, the custom field, or the image. This is kind of a hack. The only way I was able to get the attachment ID for the image was looking for the class in the image tag, which then has the ID number of the attachment on it, extracting it a little bit, making sure it's numeric, and then try and get it. By the way, the long description of an image is in the post content of an attachment. An attachment is just another kind of post. So, if this all works, we get the post X. If that doesn't work, if we can't get the post content for the image attachment, we get their excerpt, which is going to be the alt tag. And next we look for an intro. Again, we clean up, this is where we clean up the text. Here's where we're going to do some processing to find out what kind of voice. And I'm only allowing you to say male or female. And I set the defaults for the language and the voices for those. If you specify another one, it'll try it, but it may or may not work. Speed, pitch, and then we create this how array that we're going to pass to JavaScript. When we finally get down here, we're going to look at the default classes. Here's our on-click handler. And finally, we're going to return all the attributes that we put together and the content. This is actually for the link that we're going to create. And when that link is called, it's going to have this say text and say how in it. It's going to call our JavaScript function. So that's basically it. Again, at the bottom, we're going to enqueue our ListenUp script, and we're going to add our styles. And so we come to this page, which I wrote to introduce the plugin, and there's lots of examples here. This is how we can do ListenUp excerpt. And now again, it's a container, but it will function as a standalone. Here we're setting some speeds and a link. So the link shows up. We're going to say this is a button. This is the whole shortcode for this. You copy this, take care that you use real double quotes. So
This page is my testbed for a plugin I wrote called ListenUp. It provides shortcodes for using the JavaScript voice synthesis API.
So that's the fast speed that I chose. If I wanted to do a pitch,
Happy New Year.
that's the female voice I chose. Voice equals female. Okay. Here we have a description. This image is in my library with a long description, and the shortcode is placed around an image tag. Okay, and we click on it.
An early voice assistance device that enabled speech-to-speech data exchanges with intelligent remote entities. A simple interface allowed the user to choose a responding voice provider with a few swipes of the finger.
Okay, here's some foreign language things. We're setting the voice to be Amélie in the language French.
Parlez-vous français?
And my French friends say that is perfect Parisian French. And here is Meijia speaking Chinese.
1、2、3、4、5、6、7、8、9、10。
And that's Peking standard, Beijing standard. And finally, here we have a custom field. I can show you this post if you want to see it, how this is all set up.
This is a much simpler way to add sound to a post.
And I'll cancel it, whether to hear it. She has a slight Irish accent, I think. So anyway, that is it. Here is some links that you might find useful. And I thank you all for your attention. I hope I haven't gone over my time. And back to you, Steve.
Yeah, Larry, great job.
Thank you.
Really great job. I know it's a great job because Bud Krause is still here, and he usually leaves after 7 minutes. So that is amazing. We have one question, one comment. So the question is, did you originally do this? I guess, did you do this to satisfy accessibility requirements?
No, like I said, I was just interested and we got excited by voice. The voice world and what is happening with the smart assistants and edge computing and voice-enabled devices is it's breakout. It's like the early days of the web. It's like 95 and 96 when we were first coming out of the when we were first getting into the .com world and browsers were adding features every few months. It's that exciting, and I encourage everybody to at least not go to Voice Lunch, look up Voice Dead, and that's the happy hour of voice.
Nice. Yeah, Bud Kraus also, he left a comment, not a question, but he said, as one who is visually impaired, this is not needed to make a page accessible, but it's a great idea and can make content easier to access as it can provide an alternative to screen readers. So that's a +1 from him and a +1 from me too. You know, I was also thinking when you're doing it, since you made it a shortcode, I mean, it could be automated. If someone had 1,000 posts or 5,000 posts,
Right.
right, you could filter the content, automatically put wrap it in your shortcode, and now every story is you know, screen reader accessible. So it's pretty awesome.
Or you can also build it into, you know, a custom template for or a specific class of pages where you want that to happen. It doesn't have to be loaded in for your whole site.
Sure. Awesome. All right. Any other questions? Do we have any other questions for Larry before we move on? No, looks like that's it. Really
Well,
great
thank you all.
presentation, Larry. That was really interesting and awesome and unique.